You're probably familiar with the Great Old One Hastur of the Cthulhu Mythos and his yellow sign and his kingdom in Carcosa, right? It's a Lovecraftian entity. Or maybe not, because Lovecraft sort of paid homage to Hastur in his stories, to an earlier author who came up with the yellow sign and the king in yellow, called Robert Chambers. Robert Chambers also took Carcosa and Hastur from Ambrose Bierce. So yeah, that's the oldest Great Old One in a way, and also the most enigmatic, because in Lovecraft he is often just mentioned, never being a main antagonist of sort. He was put into the Cthulhu Mythos as Great Old One by August Derleth, who did most of the housekeeping of the Cthulhu Mythos and created the structure around it. And also Robert Chambers is indirectly responsible for the Necronomicon, because in his collection of short stories The King in Yellow, he introduces this book or theatrical play called The King in Yellow, which everybody reading it will go mad. And that's why it's a banned book, and you can already see why the Necronomicon is fashioned in a way after The King in Yellow, and it's a very great influence on Lovecraftian horror. And yeah, no, I'm doing a lot of Lovecraftian stories, but what can I say, I love Cthulhu Mythos. Robert William Chambers was born in 1865 and died in 1933. His second book, The King in Yellow, for which is most well known, was published in 1895, and so that makes him way before a Lovecraft was, I think, even born. That's considered one of the most important books in the American supernatural fiction, which is kind of weird because, let me tell you what, I've read The Yellow Sign many years ago, believing it would be Lovecraftian horror, and I got a book that had 4 quite good horror stories that were tied around The King in Yellow and Carcosa and the Pallid Mask and the Yellow Sign and the effects it had on people. And then we get a love story, some poems, and 3 more stories about artists in Paris, where William Chambers has studied. And these stories are, they're slice of life stories, so it's a very strange collection of books in a way that, it's like, what am I reading? And so I wanted to include one of those stories in this in this 31 short stories to Halloween. So I picked the very first one story from the King in Yellow, which is called The Repairter of Reputations, and oh boy, that story was a cluster. We're in future America of 1920, where a totalitarian ultranationalist government has taken over. It took a century to do that, right? It took almost a century to get there, but And there is this guy who has fallen off a horse. He was incarcerated in an insane asylum. He claims that it was needlessly, and he wants to take revenge on his doctor. And while incarcerated in this asylum, he heard The King in Yellow and realized something. So along with a weird man called Wild, who claims to be a repairer of reputations, they plan to start a coup to take over the US, because he is the cousin of the rightful king of the US. Problem is that his cousin is not aware of that, and he is a military, he's a lieutenant in the US Army, and he's about to get married to a girl. So our protagonist makes a plan to, to either kill his cousin before he gets married, or yeah, I'm humming because I cannot make sense of the plot of this story. Dude is cuckoo. That's the point of the story here. The yellow sign, he went cuckoo, and all those elements of a futurist America where things are different are wasted on this story. They never come into play. You can ignore that and you can get this back in the late 90s, in the late 1890s, not 1990s, and it would make as much sense. And yes, there is some surreal elements in the story. This is considered an Art Nouveau collection of stories, where the Repairter of Reputation has Walk's ears because he's missing his ears, and he lives in a small house with a cat that is constantly scratching him, and our main character has this diadem in his safe that is full of silver and diamonds. All his cousins say it, and it's stained with the glass, and it's in a biscuit tin or something. So yeah, our protagonist has gone insane. It's a weird story, and having read the entire book, I feel that there is something there. There is a very strong theme in The King in Yellow and the mythos of it, the way it's written, what it is about, this idea of America in the future where suicides are legal, and there are buildings to facilitate them, and there is this totalitarian government, and things are different, the rest of the world is in anarchy, etc., etc. There are a lot of interesting elements in the story, and they're wasted, and I feel like the entire King in Yellow as a collection is also that, it's wasted potential. And Lovecraft also said that in a letter of his, said that yes, he was wasting his potential in the stories. So I think that if you go into the King in Yellow, and yes, I won't go into the Repairter of Reputations because it was disappointing to read. And I wish I had my copy so I could go for, I think the second story in that book was quite good. It's called The Mask, and it's quite ghoulish gothic horror. As far as I remember, it was the best in the series, but I don't have it here. I have given away my copy. I haven't held the book quite some time ago, and that was the only story of Chambers I could find in my extensive collection of horror anthologies. So yeah, what can I say? It wasn't a good pick, but there'll be stinkers. That's the sad reality of it. Give The King in Yellow a read if you're interested in the history of supernatural horror in the US. I think there are a couple of interesting stories. The Repairter of Reputations is not one of them. I think The Mask was probably the best in the entire collection. If you want some, some good old-fashioned gothic horror, supernatural horror, that's your pick. It's interesting to read this as part of the Cthulhu Mythos, even though it was far before Lovecraft. But what can I say? I don't believe Hastur was mentioned in The King in Yellow. He was mentioned as King in Yellow in this book, and Lovecraft made the connection of Hastur, the King in Yellow. Yeah, actually it's mentioned, Hastur is mentioned, but it's mentioned as a place, not as a person, and he took the names like Hades and Aldebaran from Ambrose Bierce and his stories. So yeah, that's it, and Lovecraft created the entire mythos out of it. I guess that's quite interesting, but yeah, that's it. If you've read The King in Yellow, leave a comment below. I'd love to hear your opinions about the writing of Robert Chambers. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I was expecting something different and reread is in order, but judging from the story, no, it's not. I was aware of Robert Chambers not being Lovecraftian, and I didn't like this one. So yeah, that's it. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Stay spooky.